test. We're going to do some Caps, and we did check in with head coach Barry Trotz, and for sure we're going to do some Wizards, as I did some NBA earlier this week and some Terps football. But it is the National Football League, and it is first place, and it is the Ravens and the Dolphins. We've talked to so many people in Florida this week. Luke Jones joins us now to discuss the purple side of this thing, and I guess, question number one, and it'll be brought up, I'm sure, on Wednesday night when we're out at Christopher Daniel along with Zach Orr and with Anthony Levine, as well as Thursday night when we're out with Dennis Pitta at Greenmount Station up in Hampstead with the Christmas lights and the eggnog and the crab cakes. Jimmy Smith, right? I mean, that's the big question, is when we get him back, we're a better football team.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the big question the last couple of weeks. I mean, didn't work out so well not having him against Dallas, and they were able to endure without him against Cincinnati. And certainly Bengals wide receiver A.J. Green not being out there certainly helped. But, we'll have to see. I know John Harbaugh said at the beginning of the week that they had Jimmy run some on Saturday. He felt better, but not good enough yet. He's described it as a muscular issue in the back, which, if that's at face value, that's good to hear, because it's much better than there being some kind of issue with a disc or anything like that. So we're just going to have to see. Certainly they need to get him back. And when you look at this Dolphins team, while the numbers don't jump out at you, this is a team that has a trio of pretty good wide receivers in Jarvis Landry and Devontae Parker and Kenny Stills. Stills an ability to stretch the field that you'd like to have Jimmy Smith out there. The Ravens got by against the Bengals. I think they played pretty well defensively, even with some penalties aside. But this defense doesn't play at an extremely high level if it doesn't have Jimmy Smith. I think it can play good enough against most teams, but teams that have more formidable wide receivers, it's really tough.
Well, I mean, we talk about the NFC East kicking our ass, right? I mean,
yeah.
That was really about the Giants game and Odell Beckham, and that was really about the Cowboys game and Dez Bryant. And if a better job was done on those two human beings, and we have said individual to do that who wasn't out on the field, then, those games could have easily gone the other direction. And we're talking about a runaway Ravens team, and we're not talking about how bad they suck. We might be talking about the offense sucking and the offensive line not having continuity, but we'd be talking about 2 more wins, quite frankly. Right?
Well, we could be, yeah.
Well, this is what Bisciotti's story will be in January, right? Like last year it was about Sizzle setting the edge. That's kind of the way they break these down. They'll say, well, if we had Smith out there, we would have had a far better chance in those games.
I hope they're not using that excuse, because there are a lot of other issues with this football team. But yeah, that's part of it. It is. I mean, they need to have Jimmy Smith out there. But
let me talk myself into believing they're better than they are. Please, let me have a little fun.
You can. I don't want to hear them saying that, because that's a sense of everything's fine here. And I think everyone agrees there's some things that need to be addressed in the offseason. But we'll talk about that in 6 weeks. Let's talk about...
Or maybe 8 weeks, or maybe 10 weeks.
Well, sure. You never know. But, it's clear they need to have Jimmy Smith back. My concern at this point is, I think he's going to get back on the field, whether it's this week or next week, whatever it is. My concern is, okay, what kind of Jimmy Smith are you getting? Are you getting a guy who is dealing with a cranky back? Is it going to be 100%? Is it going to be something that lingers the rest of the year? And that's been one of my frustrating points with him every time, and I'm going back now three years now, every time he finally gets to that level where you say, okay, this guy's a bona fide shutdown corner, then something happens to him physically. And I'm not saying that's his fault. I mean, I don't know if there's a way to condition against a Liz Frank injury, for example. But it seems any time that he's finally regaining that form that he had late in 2013, first half of 2014 before the foot, then something happens to him physically that it doesn't necessarily keep him out of the game, although it's kept him out of the last 2 weeks. But it's something that hinders him and something that prevents him from playing at that higher level. But, we're just going to have to see. I think he clearly needs to get some practice time. At this point, it'd be difficult to envision him playing on Sunday if he's not on the practice field a whole lot this week. It doesn't have to be a full go all week long, I'd say, but he needs to be out there. So we'll see how it develops over the next few days, and Certainly, we'll see how he looks as we get closer to Sunday. But it's clear that this team needs him. I think they did a decent enough job against Cincinnati. But again, this is a Dolphins team that statistically doesn't really impress you. I mean, it's very much defensively they're not all that impressive. I mean, pass defense I think is good. The run defense has not been very good at all. They've been near the bottom of the NFL.
Which is kind of crazy when they spent all the money on Sue, right?
Yeah. And then offensively, they've really been about their running game. I mean, Jay Ajayi has been a great story for them, was really a non-factor at the very beginning of the year and then suddenly exploded, had a couple huge games, and has been kind of trucking ever since then. But, the passing offense, they don't have huge numbers. They're 28th in passing yards per game, but I think you've seen a more efficient Ryan Tannehill, and he's got some weapons to throw to. I mean, this isn't a Dolphins passing game that's completely inept. So I think having Jimmy Smith on the field becomes a little more critical than it was against Cincinnati because, frankly, I just think this is a better Dolphins team that it's amazing. I don't think they're necessarily 7-4 good. I don't think they're 6-game winning streak good. But that's what they are right now. As much as we kind of say you are what your record says you are, that kind of explains the Miami Dolphins right now. This is a formidable football team the Ravens need to be ready for.
Yeah, you said formidable. I like that word, Luke, because I'm going to the game on Sunday and I'm thinking to myself, maybe they're not that good, but if they kick our butts, they're going to be 8-4 and really good and sitting in that driver's seat for a wild card position. I mean, we could be a season wrecker for them. And everybody I've talked to in Miami, I mean, the Adam Beasleys, the people that have been down there 10, 12 years running around with a woebegone franchise where different coaches are coming in, different leadership's coming in. They change the name of the stadium every year. The off-the-field issues have always been part of the legacy down there, and guys getting into trouble and running a foul and all that nonsense. They said this is a tight ship and that Adam Gase is there and it feels different to them. And, I will respect that in a 6-game winning streak, but I also look at who they beat and who they've lost to and who they've played and know that they've got a meat of their schedule coming up now, much like the Ravens. I really don't know how this is going to go the next 5 weeks. I'm trying to, for my own sanity, remain optimistic about it because they have won some football games. They are in a position here. The Steelers aren't very good, but I'm wondering, in this mad dash to the finish line, if they lose to the Steelers on Christmas, if that happens, what's their pathway to get in? And it can't include losing on Sunday to the Dolphins, to me.
I think you're absolutely right. And, I personally feel the way it's going to shake out, I feel like they're going to have to beat Pittsburgh on Week 16 because I think you just look at Pittsburgh's schedule compared to the Ravens, and it's kind of hard to envision the Ravens winning all those other games, and then Pittsburgh beats them, but then loses to some lesser teams. Anyway, I agree with you from the standpoint of this is one the Ravens have to win. You're playing at home. This is a Dolphins team that, as you pointed out, you look at their run, the 6-game winning streak. They had the really impressive blowout win over Pittsburgh, which Pittsburgh
Thank you very much.
Point was hard to figure out, really. But after that, they beat Buffalo. Buffalo's decent, but nothing special. They beat the Jets by 4 at home. The Jets are terrible this year, and the Ravens certainly went there and lost. So that's something that it's their cross they have to bear. And then they went out to San Diego, 31-24, kind of a shootout kind of game. That was a nice win. I know the Chargers record-wise don't look great, but I think anyone who's watched them play this year, they've been very competitive. I think probably of all their wins since that Pittsburgh game, that's probably the one I point to and say that's the most impressive. Then they won an ugly game at L.A. that they probably had no business winning, and then most recently they beat the 49ers and were up multiple scores, and then the 49ers came back on them.
They beat them by 6 feet if you saw the last play of the game. Right?
So I'll say one thing. Looking at how the Dolphins are profiled and watching the Ravens all year, I'm guessing we're going to see a close football game because that's what these teams do. They play close games. So,
give me Justin Tucker from 48 for the win. Boom.
Yeah, this is one the Ravens need to have, though. There's no question about that. I mean, you look at these remaining home games with Miami and then Philadelphia, who I think everyone's seen the Eagles fall off here pretty substantially. they're decent defensively, but I think you've seen Carson Wentz look more like a rookie quarterback and doesn't have a whole lot of wide receiver help, quite frankly. But these home games the Ravens have to take care of. New England, I think most of us, I don't want to say resign, that would be too strong, but I think most people are realistic knowing that that's going to be a tall order going up there and trying to win on a Monday night. And then,
well, if there's no Gronkowski, let me play lavender-colored sky, right? At least for a moment. That if that's not there and Jimmy Smith is, fine. If Gronkowski's in there and Jimmy Smith isn't, it looks like a lot of trouble. It looks like 13 points kind of trouble.
Yeah, we got to be realistic. It's going to be that's going to be tough. I mean, the Ravens haven't put together a game all year that makes me.
But they've never ever gone up there and gotten their ass kicked either. By the way, I had this conversation with my wife this morning because we were talking about it. And I'm like, I remember walking out of that parking lot with my feelings hurt, but my feelings hurt because you missed a kick and dropped the ball to go to the Super Bowl, and because you blew a 2-touchdown lead late in the game with no secondary. It's not like. I don't think the Ravens are going to go up there and somehow lose 41-14 or something.
Well, I'm not saying that, but at the same time, that history, those were different players too. I mean, there are a lot of new players on this team from where they were in 2011 and
Tom Brady's getting old. It's late in the season. He's going to break down. Trust me.
Yeah, so, I mean, we'll see.
Now, I just said that on December 1st. Remember that if that happens.
Well, my point just being, they need to take care of these home games because none of those remaining 3 road games are gimmies. Even Week 17 at Cincinnati, which I'd certainly look at that one more favorably than New England or Pittsburgh, that's still a team that is going to love an opportunity to potentially knock the Ravens out of the playoffs. So
I sense the gravity of the situation here. They have no room to lose a game and then have to go to Pittsburgh on Christmas afternoon and have to win that game. I mean, because then that becomes the season, right? I mean, if you lose any of these games in here, other than the New England game, which we've already called kind of sort of a loss in number 2 pencil, I guess, at this point, or at least if you're penciling said things in. The Pittsburgh game's already mandatory, but a hiccup here this weekend, and the season starts to go off the hill for me.
It's just like what we talked about. It's funny. This has kind of become a common thread right now. The Dallas game, I think we all viewed how we're talking about the New England game right now. I mean, being realistic about it, probably not going to win that game, and they didn't. They didn't get embarrassed, but I think it was clear that the better football team took control in the second half. But last week with Cincinnati, we said, if the Ravens stub their toe against the Bengals, then you kind of change your entire outlook. And this has a similar feel to it. I mean, this is a Miami team that is better than Cincinnati, but still isn't a team that you look at and say, oh, the Ravens can't beat them. Yeah, they have a better record, but you look at how they've profiled. I mean, their point differential is, I think it's +9. They're 7-4, and they've scored 9 more points than they've allowed. I mean, that's a profile that says they've been pretty fortunate, actually. So. I mean, it's just
profile says you probably won close games and lost real bad blowouts.
Yeah. I mean, this is a team that their biggest strength is running the football. Well, what's the Ravens' biggest strength? Stopping the run. I do think the other side of the ball is interesting, and we haven't talked about that yet, but or too much. But this is a Dolphins defense that hasn't stopped the run very well. But at the same time, the Ravens, even against some poor run defenses, really haven't gotten their running game going to the level that they've liked, other than maybe 1 or 2 games all year. They've been okay. They were okay against Cincinnati running the football. But, this is a Dolphins team that you can control the clock and, really kind of beat them at their own game if you're capable of doing that. So, that's got to be something because the Dolphins' pass defense has been pretty decent. And
their pass rush has been really good. And if they find themselves in this 1st and 20, 3rd and 13 nonsense, Wake and these guys are going to tee off. And certainly the offensive line isn't built for that, especially with Yonda moving over and young players in there at this point. They have to move the ball forward on 1st down. And I think that's crucial.
Yeah, I mean, so many people have talked about their lack of success on 3rd down, and they're last in the NFL. I mean, they're converting 33%, exactly 1/3 of their 3rd down conversions. I mean, you're not going to win games doing that. I mean, it's amazing that they've been 6-5 with that kind of offensive profile. I mean, it speaks to how good their defense has been, and it speaks to how tremendous Justin Tucker has been. I mean, Tucker's been perfect, and look at the percent of his field goals 40 yards and longer. I mean, he hasn't had a ton of gimmies, and it shows that this team, hasn't really been able to effectively finish off drives. So I think you look at this offense right now, over these final 5 games, you got to find a way to be better on third down. How do you do that? It's what you just said. You got to be better on first and second down. This team cannot survive being in 3rd and 7 and longer. I mean, it's just, they're not built that way for whatever reason, and certainly you can look at it from a personnel standpoint, but I think the schematics as well. But this team just doesn't push the ball down the field with the passing game. They try to, and certainly they've had some success doing it with Mike Wallace and Brashad Perriman, but it's a lot of short passing. And I think the problem with that is unless it's Wallace, unless it's Perriman, and we've seen Perriman struggle to either catch the ball or to run other routes in the route tree besides a fade or a go route. But the other guys that they're throwing the football to, limited ability to get yards after the catch. I mean, Dennis Pitt is not a yards after the catch guy anymore. Their tight ends have not given them that. I think Steve Smith can be, but I think teams have also they've done some nice things with him at times from a coverage standpoint to try to limit that. So they've had a lot of teams playing 2 deep safety, trying to keep everything in front of them, and the Ravens have struggled to move the chains in that regard. How many times this year have we seen 3rd and 8 and they're throwing a 5-yard pass? I mean, it's maddening, but some of it has to do with how teams have played them, and some of it has to do with just where they are as an offense right now. So they have to get better on first and second down. They have to run the ball better. They have to put Joe Flacco in favorable situations, and then he's got to convert more of them. So it's an all-encompassing thing. I think the good news is you look at the fact that they have found some stability with their offensive line. Yes, Alex Lewis is still out, but Yanda's settled into that left guard spot out of necessity. I think Vlad Dukas has held up well enough at right guard, and I think they're getting a little more stability there. It's not a great offensive line. I don't think it's a great offensive line when they're all healthy. I think that's something they need to continue to take a long look at after the season. But I think it's playing.
Well, they did take a long look. They drafted Ronnie Stanley, and they gave Marshall Yanda $10 million. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, from that standpoint, there's only, and they made the trade for Zuda, and they've tried to draft better,
and they signed Eugene Monroe, which was an utter failure of a sign.
Sure.
So I mean, but it's something they need to address. They do. I mean, we all talk about wanting Joe Flacco to play better. Well, these are the things you need to do. You got to invest in your offense. I mean, you do.
Fair point.
You have a first-round pick for Stanley. That was a good start, but I think there's 1 or 2 other spots on that O-line they need to try to upgrade. So we'll see. Again, those are conversations we'll have at a later time. But the good news is, seems like the line is certainly playing better than it did a month ago. Pass protection has been better the last couple weeks, and it's just a matter of trying to find that consistency. I mean, same conversation we've had since week 1, right? The same things we were talking about in September, we're talking about it in November in terms of overall production from the offense. They've been better than they were in October. I mean, October was painful to watch, as bad as that offense was. But I don't get the sense that they're markedly better than they were in September either. So they got to play at a higher level. There's no doubt about that. I don't know if they necessarily need to go out there and score 30 points to beat the Dolphins, but I think you've got to be looking at efforts like that in order to beat teams like New England and Pittsburgh on the road. Maybe not 30, but got to be scoring at least well into the 20s, and that's something that this team hasn't been able to do consistently.
He is Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke at on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. Don't forget Wednesday night, Anthony Levine and Zach Orr coming together with Christopher Daniel in Timonium. The defensive guys and the leading tackler on the team, Zach Orr. That's on Wednesday. Thursday, we got Dennis Pitta at Greenmount Station up in Hampstead. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero both evenings. Come out, give a spit, say hello, grab a beer, grab a sandwich, grab a crab cake. It's going to be fun. Ravens are in first place. Plenty to talk about. No doom and gloom on Wednesday and Thursday at our live shows, but the fish are coming in on Sunday, and certainly we're all keeping our fingers crossed. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And don't forget, the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there for you 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. You want to download podcast, you want to hear my conversation with Barry Trotz earlier in the week, or the conversation we had with Bino Ranson earlier in the week, you can go do that. All is well there. The morning newspaper ships to you at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life there. Last but never least, breaking news. Jimmy Smith's injury. Orioles do something. Who knows? But if it's breaking news, never spam, always on time and always first. You'll get it on the WNST Tech Service. That's brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Kolatzos will be here from 3 until 5, back in his usual time slot, driving you home on Thursday, this Thursday and every Thursday, getting you ready for Thursday Night Football, as well as Ravens action this weekend. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.